Evil thrives when silence reigns, but silence breaks violently. On a back road under the summer sun, two deputies closed in, certain they'd found another powerless man to intimidate. Marcus looked like an easy mark, black, alone, unarmed, and compliant enough for their routine stop. They laughed at his calm, mistaking patience for fear. What they couldn't see was the soldier inside him, a Navy SEAL forged by war and survival. When their threats turned into gunfire, Marcus answered instinct with precision. That day, predators became prey, and a quiet man became the spark of a movement they never saw coming. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Marcus Hale's hands rested at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, his posture relaxed but alert as he guided his weathered Toyota Camry through the tree-lined streets of Riverside Heights. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement, and the familiar scent of fresh-cut grass drifted through his slightly cracked window. After 12 hours of loading trucks at the warehouse, his muscles ached with a satisfying tiredness. The radio played softly, some local jazz station he'd grown to appreciate during his drives home. It reminded him of easier times, back when his biggest worry was making sure the inventory numbers matched at the end of his shift. A slight smile crossed his face as he thought about how different this was from his previous life. No more midnight operations, no more split-second decisions that meant life or death. Just regular work, regular hours, and blessed quiet. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Marcus glanced over. Another message from Leah. His sister never seemed to rest, always fighting some new battle in the courthouse or organizing another community meeting. Last week, she'd lectured him for a solid hour about police accountability in their neighborhood. "You can't just stand by," she'd insisted, her dark eyes blazing with the same fire their mother used to have. "You have skills, experience. The community needs people like you to speak up." Marcus shook his head, remembering how he'd deflected her arguments. "I've seen enough conflict," he'd told her. "Some of us just want peace." The memory of her frustrated sigh echoed in his mind. The dashboard clock read 5:47 p.m. Traffic was light, most people already home or still at work. Marcus adjusted his rearview mirror, a habit from his training days that had never quite left him. That's when he first noticed the patrol car, 3 cars back, maintaining a steady distance. "Just routine," he muttered to himself, though his shoulders tensed slightly. He checked his speed, exactly at the limit. His registration was current, lights all working. No reason for concern. But after 2 minutes of the same patrol car following his exact turns, the back of his neck started to prickle. The radio host's smooth voice filled the car. And that was Miles Davis with "So What?" coming up next. Marcus reached over and turned it down. His attention split between the road ahead and the persistent presence in his mirror. Another turn onto Maple Street, past the elementary school where kids' artwork decorated the windows. The patrol car followed. Marcus took a deep breath, consciously relaxing his grip on the steering wheel. His mind started calculating distances, scanning his surroundings, another old habit he couldn't shake. To his right, a construction site stretched for nearly a block. Concrete barriers lined the road where they were expanding the sidewalk, creating a narrow channel for cars to pass through. Orange cones and construction equipment dotted the site, and a few workers in yellow vests were packing up for the day. The patrol car edged closer. Marcus checked his mirror again. He could make out 2 officers in the vehicle now, their faces obscured by the late afternoon glare on their windshield. His heart rate remained steady, but his mind sharpened with familiar focus. 8 years of SEAL training had taught him to notice details. The way the patrol car's front bumper was slightly dented on the passenger side, how the driver sat forward in his seat, the fact that no other cars had passed them in the last 3 minutes. Leah's voice echoed in his head again. "It's different for us, Marcus. You know that." He'd argued with her then, said she was being paranoid. Now, watching the patrol car edge even closer, he wondered if his sister's paranoia wasn't wisdom in disguise. The radio host's voice drifted up again. "Weather's looking clear for the rest of the evening, folks. Perfect night for—" Marcus reached over and shut it off completely, needing the silence to think. He ran through his recent drive in his mind. No traffic violations, no sudden moves, nothing that could be considered suspicious. Just a black man driving home from work in a neighborhood that grew whiter and more affluent with each passing year. He'd chosen this route specifically because it was well lit and populated. Another habit he'd developed without consciously meaning to. The concrete barriers created a canyon effect on either side of the road, their gray surfaces tagged with orange spray paint marking measurements for the construction crew. A few workers glanced up as Marcus's car passed, then returned to their end-of-day routines. The sun hit the barriers at an angle that cast long shadows across the road, creating a striped pattern of light and dark. That's when the flashing lights came on behind him, red and blue reflecting off the concrete walls and his rearview mirror. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but his movements remained controlled as he signaled and carefully pulled his car to the right, positioning it precisely parallel to one of the concrete barriers. He let out a long, measured breath, the same kind he used to take before underwater training exercises. His hands stayed visible on the steering wheel, his posture straight, but not rigid. Through his side mirror, he watched the patrol car stop several feet behind him, its lights continuing to flash against the gathering shadows of early evening. The construction workers had stopped what they were doing, their attention drawn to the scene unfolding before them. Their yellow vests glowed in the patrol car's rotating lights, silent witnesses to whatever was about to happen next. The approaching footsteps on the asphalt carried a deliberate heaviness, boots striking the ground with unnecessary force. Marcus watched in his side mirror as 2 officers emerged from the patrol car. One tall and broad-shouldered, the other shorter, but just as wide. They moved with exaggerated swagger, hands resting on their utility belts near their weapons. The taller officer, Donnelly, according to his nameplate, reached Marcus's window first. He yanked a flashlight from his belt and shone it directly into Marcus's face, despite the afternoon sun still lighting everything clearly. "License and registration," Donnelly barked, his tone dripping with contempt. "And explain what business a man like you has in this neighborhood." Marcus kept his hands visible on the steering wheel. "My license is in my back pocket, officer. I'm going to reach for it slowly." "A man like you driving a car like this?" The second officer, Carter, sneered from behind Donnelly. "Sure it belongs to you?" "Yes, sir," Marcus replied evenly, his movements deliberate as he retrieved his wallet. "I live just 3 blocks from here. I'm coming home from work." Donnelly snatched the license, studying it with exaggerated suspicion. "Marcus Hale," he read aloud, making the name sound like an accusation. "And you expect us to believe you live in Riverside Heights?" "Been here 2 years," Marcus said, maintaining his calm despite the growing knot in his stomach. The construction workers had stopped pretending to work, watching the scene unfold with worried expressions. "Step out of the vehicle," Carter ordered, his hand now resting on his holstered pistol. "Now." Marcus complied, movements slow and precise. The concrete barrier pressed against his back as the officers crowded his space, forcing him away from his car. The setting sun cast their shadows long across the pavement, Three dark figures stretched against the orange-painted barriers. Donnelly leaned in close, his breath hot against Marcus's ear. "You won't be going home tonight." The words carried a promise that made Marcus's combat instincts surge to life. 8 years of SEAL training screamed danger. Time seemed to slow as Donnelly's hand moved to his holster. Marcus felt the familiar clarity of combat awareness settle over him, the hyper-focused state where every detail became crystal clear. He noticed the sweat beading on Donnelly's forehead, the slight tremor in Carter's trigger finger, the way the construction workers had pulled out their phones. The cold press of Donnelly's pistol against Marcus's ribs confirmed what his instincts had already known. This was never about a traffic stop. They had followed him, cornered him, and now intended to kill him. Marcus moved before conscious thought took over. Years of training guided his muscles as he twisted away from Donnelly's gun, simultaneously drawing his own concealed firearm. The motion was fluid, practiced, perfect, the result of countless hours of drills and real-world operations. His first shot caught Donnelly in the side, precise and controlled. The officer's eyes widened in shock as he stumbled backward, his own weapon discharging harmlessly into the concrete barrier. Carter's response was pure panic. He emptied his magazine in wild bursts, bullets striking everywhere except their intended target. Marcus had already rolled behind the nearest barrier, his movements revealing years of tactical training. The construction workers scattered, some ducking behind their equipment, others running for cover while fumbling with their phones. The suburban street transformed into a combat zone. The sound of gunfire echoed off the concrete walls, creating a disorienting cacophony. Spent shell casings pinged against the asphalt. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air. Marcus pressed his back against the barrier, his white T-shirt now stained with dust and sweat. His olive-green cargo pants, chosen for comfort during his warehouse shifts, now served as combat wear. He gripped his pistol with both hands, muscle memory taking over as he fired carefully placed shots over his shoulder. Carter's panicked voice carried over the gunfire. "Officer down! Officer down! Suspect is armed and—" A bullet from Marcus struck the patrol car's hood near Carter's position, cutting off his radio call. The precision of the shot sent a clear message. This was no amateur they were dealing with. The realization seemed to hit Carter all at once. His next shots came wilder, more desperate. Marcus could hear the fear in the officer's breathing, the growing understanding that their intended victim was far more dangerous than they'd assumed. They had expected an easy target, someone to bully and eliminate without consequence. Instead, they'd attacked a man trained to survive in the world's deadliest environments. Carter's footsteps pounded against the pavement as he fled, leaving his wounded partner behind. His retreat was hasty, uncoordinated, the movement of someone who had never expected to face real resistance. The sudden silence felt heavier than the gunfire. Marcus remained in his defensive position, controlling his breathing just as he'd been trained. Sunlight caught the gun smoke drifting through the air, turning it golden. His hands trembled slightly as the adrenaline began to ebb, the full weight of what had just happened settling over him. He stared at his shaking fingers wrapped around the pistol, hands that had spent years loading boxes, trying to forget their deadly training. Hands that had just been forced to defend their owner against those sworn to protect and serve. The simple life he'd built, the peace he'd found in routine and anonymity, had shattered in a matter of minutes. Marcus's tires squealed as he pulled into Leah's driveway, gravel crunching under the wheels. His sister burst through her front door before he could even cut the engine, her face a mix of fury and terror. "Get inside! Now!" Leah hissed, grabbing his arm and practically dragging him through the doorway. Her modern living room, usually pristine and organized, showed signs of frantic pacing. Papers scattered across the coffee table, a half-empty wine glass tipped over on its side. "I saw it on the news," she said, slamming the door and engaging all 3 locks. "What were you thinking, Marcus?" "Actually, don't answer that. I know exactly what you were thinking, because those racist bastards left you no choice." Her voice cracked with emotion. Marcus sank into her leather couch, his body finally registering the exhaustion. "They were going to kill me, Leah. Made it clear from the start." His hands were still trembling slightly. "One of them whispered it right in my ear. Said I wouldn't be going home tonight." Leah's pacing stopped. She turned to face him, her legal mind already working through scenarios. "Tell me everything. Don't leave out a single detail." As Marcus recounted the ambush, Leah's laptop suddenly chimed with a news alert. She rushed to open it, and Marcus moved to stand behind her. The screen showed shaky footage from a police body camera, the confrontation from earlier playing out in horrifying clarity. "Someone leaked it," Leah whispered, her eyes wide. "Look, you can see everything. The flashlight in broad daylight, them forcing you against the barrier." Her voice grew stronger with each detail. The whispered threat, Donnelly drawing first, it's all there. The footage continued playing, showing Marcus's precise defensive movements, the controlled shots, Carter's panicked retreat. Comments were already flooding the video. Navy SEAL defending himself. Police tried to murder him. This is what systematic racism looks like. Local news channels picked up the story within hours. Crowds began gathering outside the police station, their signs demanding justice, accountability, reform. Social media exploded with hashtags supporting Marcus, calling him a hero for standing up to corrupt cops. "This might actually work in our favor," Leah said, scrolling through responses. "Public sentiment is with you. The footage proves self-defense. Maybe for once, the truth will be enough." Marcus watched the protesters through Leah's window, their numbers growing by the minute. For the first time since the shooting, he felt a flicker of hope. The evidence was clear, undeniable. Surely even the most corrupt system couldn't ignore such blatant proof. Across town, in his dimly lit office at police headquarters, Lieutenant Frank Rourke watched the same footage with cold fury. His massive fist clenched around a glass of bourbon as the scene played out on his monitor. Each frame felt like a personal insult. His officers exposed, his authority challenged, his carefully maintained system of control threatened. "Sir," his secretary appeared in the doorway, holding a thick file. "You need to see this. We pulled everything we could find on Marcus Hale's military record." Rourke snatched the file, flipping it open. His eyes narrowed as he read, then widened with growing alarm. "This can't be right," he muttered, pages rustling as he searched for confirmation. "Check these classifications again." "It's all verified, sir," the secretary said nervously. Marcus Hale wasn't just a Navy SEAL. After Bud S. training, he was recruited for a classified Delta Force detachment. 5 years of black ops, multiple commendations that are still classified. The details are redacted, but his combat effectiveness ratings are off the charts. Rourke's face reddened as he read further. This was no ordinary veteran they were dealing with. This was a ghost, a shadow warrior trained in the darkest arts of modern warfare. Someone who could disappear, survive, and strike back with lethal precision. "Get me every available officer," Rourke barked, standing so suddenly his chair toppled backward. "I want that body cam footage scrubbed from every server, every social media platform. Buy off the witnesses. Threaten the journalists. I don't care what it takes. This ends now. He stormed to his window, watching the growing crowd of protesters below. Their chants echoed off the building's stone facade, demanding justice for Marcus Hale. Rourke's grip tightened on his glass until it shattered, sending bourbon and blood dripping down his hand. A ghost, he snarled, ignoring the cuts on his palm. We stirred up a damn ghost. A Delta Force operator living right under our noses, playing warehouse worker, trying to live quiet. He wiped his bleeding hand on his uniform pants, leaving dark streaks. We should have never awakened him, should have left him alone in his little peaceful life. Glass crunched under his shoes as he paced, mind racing through contingencies. This wasn't just about silencing one man anymore. This was about containing a highly trained operative who had spent years mastering the art of survival against impossible odds. Someone who could turn the city itself into a battlefield if pushed too far. The protesters' chants grew louder, more insistent. Rourke glared down at them, his face twisted with rage. A ghost, he repeated, blood dripping onto his polished floor. A ghost we should have never awakened. We need to get ahead of this, Leah said, pacing her living room while clutching her phone. The longer you stay in hiding, the worse it looks. We should go to the courthouse right now, turn yourself in, and fight this properly. Marcus watched his sister from the couch, noting how she'd shifted into full attorney mode. Her voice steady, shoulders squared, mind already building a defense strategy. But he knew better. 10 years of military service had taught him how systems really worked, how easily truth could be buried. They'll lock me up and lose the evidence, he said quietly. That body cam footage? It'll disappear. Witnesses will change their stories. You know how this works, Leah. I can file motions to preserve evidence. We can... The TV interrupted her, breaking news graphics flashing across the screen. The police department seal appeared, followed by Lieutenant Rourke stepping up to a podium crowded with microphones. Camera flashes created a strobing effect that made Marcus's combat instincts twitch. At approximately 2:30 p.m. today, Rourke began, his voice grave and practiced. 2 of our finest officers conducted a routine traffic stop that escalated into a violent confrontation. The suspect, now identified as Marcus Hale, opened fire without provocation, critically wounding Officer James Donnelly. That's a lie, Leah shouted at the screen. They had their guns drawn first, Rourke continued, his face a mask of rehearsed concern. What we've uncovered about Mr. Hale is deeply troubling. He is a trained military operative with a history of violence, who has now brought terror to our peaceful streets. We believe he poses an immediate threat to public safety. Marcus watched as photos appeared beside Rourke, his driver's license picture, an old military ID shot, and finally a heavily edited clip from the confrontation that showed only his return fire, completely erasing the officer's initial aggression. Domestic terrorist? Leah spat the words. They're trying to paint you as some kind of extremist. She grabbed her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. Look at this. Social media is already splitting. Half the people are calling out the lies, but the other half... Marcus leaned over to see the screen. Comment sections had become battlegrounds. While many defended him, pointing to the original body cam footage, others had already absorbed the department's narrative. Navy SEAL gone rogue. Cop killer deserves what he gets. Find him before he strikes again. The major news networks picked up the story, each spinning it differently. CNN interviewed civil rights activists who pointed out the pattern of police violence. Fox News had former officers calling Marcus a ticking time bomb, and questioning why someone with his training was hiding in plain sight. "They're scared," Marcus observed, his voice low and controlled. "Rourke knows what I am now. He's trying to turn public opinion before the truth spreads further." Leah's phone buzzed constantly with messages from other attorneys, activists, and journalists seeking comments. She fielded each one carefully, aware that every word could impact her brother's fate. "We need to make a statement," she insisted. "Get our side of the story out there before they completely control the narrative." "No," Marcus said firmly. "Any statement I make now will be twisted. They'll analyze every word, every gesture, looking for proof that I'm exactly what they say I am." He stood up, moving to the window with the careful silence that had kept him alive in war zones. Through the gaps in Leah's curtains, he could see news vans beginning to gather on her street. The TV droned on, different anchors debating his fate, like he was already convicted. Military experts dissected his service record, or what little they could access of it. Amateur psychologists speculated about PTSD and military mindset, building a profile of a dangerous man pushed over the edge. "Look at how they're doing this," Marcus said, gesturing to the screen. "They're not just attacking what I did. They're attacking who I am, making people afraid of me. Once fear takes hold, truth doesn't matter anymore." Leah started to respond, but the TV caught their attention again. The afternoon news showed a split screen. On one side, protesters supporting Marcus clashed with police outside the precinct. On the other, his military ID photo glared out at viewers under bold red letters, "Armed and dangerous." Marcus's fists clenched as he watched his own face become a symbol of terror. Everything he'd built since leaving the service, the quiet life, the regular job, the peaceful routine, was being erased. In its place, they were creating a monster, a threat to be eliminated. "They won't stop," he said, watching another edited clip of the shooting play across the screen. "Rourke will keep pushing until every person in this city sees me as a killer. Until my own neighbors would turn me in just to feel safe." Leah moved to stand beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "Then we fight harder. We find more evidence. There must have been security cameras at that construction site. Other witnesses we can—" "Shh." Marcus suddenly tensed, holding up his hand. His trained ears had caught something. Movement outside, the subtle crunch of boots on gravel trying too hard to be quiet. The hunt was beginning. Dawn broke over the neighborhood with the rumble of armored vehicles. Marcus sat in Leah's basement, watching through a narrow window well as black-clad figures moved between houses like shadows. SWAT teams had turned the quiet suburban streets into a war zone. Upstairs, Leah's TV murmured with news coverage. She kept the volume low, but Marcus could still make out the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors from the aerial footage. His training told him they were using a standard search grid pattern, the kind he'd once helped develop. A child's scream pierced the morning air. Marcus pressed closer to the window, his jaw tight as he watched officers drag a family out of their home 3 doors down. The mother protested, trying to shield her kids while officers ransacked their house. They were new to the neighborhood. Marcus had helped them unload moving boxes just last month. "They're searching every house on the block," Leah whispered, coming down the basement stairs with a thermos of coffee and some protein bars. "No warrants, just voluntary compliance checks. Anyone who refuses gets marked as suspicious." Marcus accepted the coffee, but couldn't take his eyes off the scene outside. "They're trying to pressure the neighborhood, make everyone so scared and angry that they'll give me up just to make it stop." More shouts echoed from another house. An elderly man was being pushed against his garage door, while officers questioned him. Marcus recognized him as Mr. Chen, who often shared vegetables from his garden. Now he watched helplessly as they tore through his carefully tended beds, claiming they were checking for evidence. "I've got 3 different civil rights organizations ready to file complaints," Leah said, her laptop balanced on a stack of storage boxes she'd converted into a makeshift desk. "The ACLU wants to take this federal. But Rourke's got the mayor convinced this is about public safety, so they're letting him run wild." Marcus moved away from the window, his footsteps silent even on the creaking basement floor. Years of training had made stealth second nature. He found a spot where he could see the TV reflection in an old mirror, keeping track of the news coverage while staying out of sight. The morning shows were full of Rourke's face. He stood in front of cameras in his crisp uniform, playing the role of concerned commander perfectly. "We understand these measures may seem extreme," he was saying, "but when dealing with a highly trained military operative, we must take every precaution to protect our citizens." A new sound drew Marcus's attention: boots on Leah's front porch. She hurried upstairs as someone pounded on the door. Marcus melted into the shadows behind the water heater, one hand instinctively checking the pistol at his hip. "Ms. Hale," a gruff voice carried down through the floor, "we need to search the premises. Do you have a warrant?" Leah's lawyer voice was calm and steady. "Ma'am, your brother is a dangerous fugitive. We can get a warrant, but that would make things complicated for you." Marcus recognized the threat in those words. He'd heard similar tones in war zones, the false courtesy that preceded violence. "I'm an officer of the court," Leah replied. "You want to search my home? You come back with proper documentation. Now get off my property." The door closed firmly. Marcus counted footsteps moving away, then Leah's slower steps returning to the basement. Her face was flushed with anger. "They're watching the house," she said. "Probably have been all night. I'll need to be careful getting supplies." She pulled out her phone, showing him a messaging app. "I've set up secure channels with some trusted people. We can coordinate." A crash from outside cut her off. Through the window well, Marcus saw officers flipping over trash cans, breaking flower pots, creating chaos on every lawn they searched. The message was clear: cooperation would be rewarded, resistance punished. On TV, a reporter interviewed a police expert who explained how military training could make someone unstable and prone to violence. They showed clips of other veteran-involved incidents, building a narrative of dangerous men who couldn't readjust to civilian life. "They're not just coming after me," Marcus said quietly. "They're using this to justify every abuse of power, every act of intimidation." He watched as officers forced another family to sit on their curb, guns trained on parents and children alike. "They're showing everyone what happens when you stand up to them." Leah's phone buzzed with messages from neighbors. Reports of broken doors, torn-up homes, personal items confiscated as evidence. Some had been held for hours of questioning about their connections to Marcus. Others had their phones and computers taken for examination. "The whole system is rotten," Leah said, her voice tight with fury. "This isn't about finding you anymore. It's about making an example, showing everyone that resistance is futile." Marcus moved to another window as more shouts erupted outside. A young black teenager was being pushed against a patrol car, his mother crying as officers claimed he matched a description. The boy's only crime was living on the same street where Marcus had dared to defend himself. "I tried to stay quiet," Marcus whispered, more to himself than Leah. "Tried to live peaceful, keep my head down. But they won't let us do that, will they? They need us afraid, need us broken." He turned to his sister, his eyes hard with decision. The passive man who'd driven home from his warehouse job was gone. In his place stood the warrior he'd tried to leave behind, awakened by the sound of his community's pain. "If they want a war," he whispered to Leah, "I'll give them one." The underground parking garage was a maze of concrete pillars and shadows. Marcus moved silently between parked cars, checking sightlines and escape routes. Old habits that had kept him alive in combat zones. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, creating pools of harsh light between patches of darkness. Leah stood near their meeting spot, pretending to check her phone while scanning for surveillance. They'd chosen this location carefully. Level B3 of an office complex, no cameras, multiple exits, and enough ambient noise from ventilation systems to mask conversation. "He's here," Leah whispered, spotting a figure emerging from the stairwell. Daniel Cross walked with purpose, his messenger bag slung across his chest. At 45, he carried himself with the careful alertness of someone who'd learned the hard way that truth-telling was dangerous work. His eyes swept the garage professionally, noting the same tactical details Marcus had already catalogued. Marcus emerged from behind a concrete pillar, moving like smoke. Daniel started slightly. Even expecting him, he hadn't seen Marcus's approach. "Mr. Cross," Marcus said quietly, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming. Call me Daniel." The journalist's handshake was firm. "And thank you for trusting me. Not many outlets are willing to question the official narrative right now." They moved deeper into the shadows, finding a spot where they could see all approaches while remaining hidden. Marcus positioned himself so he could watch both the main ramp and the emergency exit. His movements were fluid, automatic, the muscle memory of 100 combat operations. "Tell me everything," Daniel said, pulling out a small recorder. "From the beginning." Marcus spoke in clear, measured tones, describing the traffic stop, the officer's threats, the moment he realized they intended to kill him. He explained how they'd forced him toward the concrete barriers, using the construction site for cover. "They knew what they were doing," Marcus said. "They picked that spot carefully. No witnesses, no cameras. They'd done this before." Daniel nodded, taking notes. "I've been investigating Officer Donnelly for months. There's a pattern of similar stops, always in isolated areas. 3 black men have disappeared after encounters with him. No bodies, no evidence, just missing persons reports and grieving families." Leah pulled out her laptop, showing Daniel footage she'd gathered from nearby businesses. "Most of it's been confiscated by police, but we managed to save these clips. They show the officers drawing weapons first, prove it was self-defense." A car door slammed somewhere above them. Marcus melted into the darkness, moving to check the sound. His footsteps were silent on the concrete, his body naturally finding cover behind vehicles and pillars. Daniel watched with professional interest. "You move like a ghost," the journalist observed when Marcus returned. "Special operations?" "SEALs," Marcus confirmed quietly. "Then some other units. It's not something I advertise." "That's why they're so afraid of you," Daniel realized. "You're not just a witness to their crimes. You're someone who can fight back. Someone who knows how their tactical teams operate." Marcus nodded. "They're used to terrorizing civilians who can't defend themselves. But they picked the wrong target this time." More sounds echoed through the garage. Normal activity, people heading to their cars after work. But each noise made them pause, check their surroundings. Marcus constantly shifted position, never staying still for long. "The public needs to see this," Daniel said, examining the footage on Leah's laptop. "The real story, not Rourke's propaganda. People are already questioning the department's actions, especially after today's raids. They're getting sloppy," Leah added, "pushing too hard, too fast. The community's angry. Even people who usually support police are disturbed by what they're seeing. Marcus moved to another vantage point, scanning the upper levels through gaps in the concrete. His body was relaxed but ready, like a coiled spring. "They're scared," he said softly. "Scared of what happens if people stop being afraid of them." Daniel copied the files to a flash drive, then another for backup. "I'll broadcast this tonight. My producer's already on board. She's been wanting to expose Rourke for years. Once this goes public, it'll be harder for them to bury the truth." "Be careful," Marcus warned. "They'll come after you, too." "I've dealt with corrupt officials before," Daniel said, but his eyes showed he understood the danger. "I've got secure servers, multiple copies in different locations. If anything happens to me, the story still gets out." They heard footsteps on the stairs, multiple people moving quickly. Marcus signaled silently, using hand gestures that Daniel somehow understood. They split up, taking different routes to their exits. Marcus moved like he was back in combat, flowing from shadow to shadow. He caught glimpses of Daniel doing the same, showing surprising skill at staying hidden. The journalist clearly had experience evading surveillance. The footsteps turned out to be a group of office workers heading home, laughing about weekend plans. But the moment of tension reminded them all of what was at stake. 24 hours, Daniel promised, carefully checking the stairwell before preparing to leave. By this time tomorrow, everyone will know the truth. The flash drive disappeared into a hidden pocket in his bag. Marcus watched from darkness as Daniel walked away, his steps purposeful but unhurried, just another professional heading home after work. For the first time since the shooting, Marcus felt something close to hope. The weight of silence had been crushing him, the pressure to accept injustice like so many before him. But now there was a chance for truth to emerge. "He'll get it done," Leah said softly, reading his expression. "Daniel's one of the good ones. He doesn't back down." Marcus nodded, already planning their next move. The soldier in him knew that hope was dangerous in battle, but sometimes it was the only thing worth fighting for. The midday sun beat down on the crowded streets as Marcus moved carefully through the sea of protesters. His dark hoodie was pulled low, obscuring his face, but his eyes remained sharp and alert. The air thrummed with energy as hundreds of voices joined together, their chants echoing off downtown buildings. "Justice for Marcus! Justice for Marcus!" It felt surreal hearing strangers shout his name. Some carried handmade signs with his photo. Others wore T-shirts declaring, "I stand with Marcus Hale." The crowd stretched for blocks. Students, families, community leaders, all united in anger at police brutality. Marcus kept to the edges of the crowd, using his training to stay invisible while observing everything. A group of mothers pushed strollers decorated with protest signs. Young men with megaphones led call and response chants. Elderly church ladies sat in folding chairs, fanning themselves in the heat while holding signs that read, "Our sons matter." "They can't hide the truth anymore," a speaker shouted from a makeshift platform. "We all saw that footage. They tried to murder an innocent man, a veteran who served this country." The crowd roared in response. Marcus felt his throat tighten. After years of keeping his head down, trying to live quietly, he'd become a symbol. These people were risking their safety to demand justice, not just for him, but for countless others who'd faced similar violence. He spotted police gathering at the intersections, their riot gear gleaming in the sun. The sight triggered his combat instincts. Their body language was wrong, too tense, too eager. They were preparing for violence. A young boy nearby tugged his mother's sleeve. "Mom, what's that smell?" Marcus recognized the acrid scent an instant before the first canister arced through the air. "Tear gas!" he shouted, his voice lost in the sudden screams. "Cover your faces!" White clouds billowed through the crowd. People scattered, choking and stumbling. Marcus pulled his hoodie up to cover his nose and mouth, fighting the urge to run. Instead, he moved deeper into the chaos, helping others escape the chemical clouds. Through the haze, he saw Officer Carter leading a line of cops in riot gear. They swung batons indiscriminately, shoving elderly protesters to the ground, striking anyone within reach. Carter's face was twisted with ugly satisfaction as he grabbed a woman's phone and smashed it. "No recordings!" Carter shouted, knocking cameras from hands, destroying evidence of police violence. "Clear the streets now!" A teenage girl tried to film the police beating a man. Carter backhanded her hard, sending her sprawling. She hit the pavement with a cry of pain, blood streaming from her nose. Marcus's combat training screamed at him to stay hidden, to protect himself. But watching that girl fall broke something inside him. Without hesitation, he darted forward, keeping low. The girl was dazed, trying to crawl away as Carter advanced on her again. Marcus reached her first, scooping her up in one fluid motion. She couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds. Her phone was still clutched in her trembling hand, cracked screen recording. "I got you," Marcus murmured, shielding her body with his as they moved through the tear gas. "Keep that phone." "Keep recording." Carter's voice cut through the chaos. "Hey, stop right there!" Marcus didn't stop. Using the panicked crowd as cover, he carried the girl to safety behind a row of parked cars. Other protesters helped her sit up, offering water to wash the tear gas from her eyes. "Thank you," she gasped, still gripping her phone. They just started hitting everyone." "What's your name?" Marcus asked, checking her for serious injuries. "Sophia." She wiped blood from her nose. "I got it all on video. The way they attacked us. People need to see this." Marcus nodded, careful to keep his face turned away. "Get that footage online. Show everyone what they're doing." More screams erupted nearby. Through gaps in the crowd, Marcus saw officers dragging protesters into vans, zip-tying hands behind backs. An elderly man lay motionless on the sidewalk, his protest sign broken beside him. Journalists were being targeted specifically, their cameras destroyed, their bodies thrown to the ground. Lieutenant Rourke stood at the edge of the violence, watching with cold satisfaction as his officers unleashed brutality on civilians. Marcus caught fragments of his words to Carter. "Make them remember. Consequences for supporting. Send a message." The rage that filled Marcus was different from anything he'd felt in combat. This wasn't war. This was torture, intended to terrorize American citizens into silence. He'd spent years trying to forget his military training, trying to live peacefully. But watching Rourke's officers beat defenseless people, seeing the calculated cruelty in their actions, Marcus knew he couldn't hide anymore. "Get to safety," he told Sophia, helping her stand. "Share that video everywhere. Don't let them bury this." She nodded, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Other protesters helped her away from the chaos, supporting her as she limped. Marcus stayed crouched behind the cars, watching officers continue their assault on the crowd. His hands clenched into fists as he witnessed more brutality. A woman pepper-sprayed while holding her hands up. A teenager slammed face first into a wall. An old man kicked while lying on the ground. "I won't run anymore," he whispered, the words tasting like a vow. The time for hiding was over. These people were fighting for him, facing violence in his name. He owed them more than silence. As evening fell, Marcus and Leah huddled around a laptop in her darkened basement. The local news played quietly in the background while they waited for Daniel's broadcast. Their phones buzzed constantly with encrypted messages from supporters coordinating safe houses and supplies. "He's going live in 5 minutes," Leah whispered, gripping Marcus's arm. Her normally confident voice trembled with tension. Marcus nodded, his military training evident in his controlled breathing and steady hands. But inside, his heart raced. Everything hinged on this moment. The footage Daniel had recovered from street cameras would either save or doom him. The local news suddenly cut to Daniel Cross's face, his expression grave but determined. "Good evening. I'm Daniel Cross, and what you're about to see will change everything you think you know about the Marcus Hale case." The screen shifted to crystal-clear security footage. There was Marcus's car, pulling over perfectly. The officers approaching with hands already on weapons. The aggressive stance, the shoves, the whispered threat caught by enhanced audio. "You won't be going home tonight." Then came the moment that made Leah gasp. Officer Donnelly clearly drawing his weapon first, jamming it into Marcus's ribs while Marcus's hands were still raised. The footage showed the whole truth in brutal detail. A planned execution thwarted only by Marcus's training and reflexes. The police department claimed Marcus Hale was a dangerous criminal who attacked officers without provocation. Daniel's voice continued over the footage. But as you can see, this was an attempted murder by officers who never expected their victim to fight back. Social media exploded instantly. Leah's phone lit up with notifications as the footage spread like wildfire. Justice for Marcus started trending nationwide within minutes. The basement felt electric with possibility. "Look at this," Leah said, scrolling through her phone. "People are sharing it everywhere. News networks are picking it up. Daniel did it. He really did it." Marcus watched silently as more stations interrupted regular programming to show the footage. Commentators who'd condemned him days ago now spoke of police corruption and systemic racism. The narrative was shifting before their eyes. A donation website for Marcus's legal defense crashed from too much traffic. Civil rights organizations issued statements demanding all charges be dropped. Celebrities tweeted support. Even politicians who'd stayed quiet began calling for investigations into the police department. "Marcus," Leah said softly, "this could change everything. With this evidence, we can fight them in court. We can win." For the first time since the shooting, Marcus felt the weight on his shoulders lighten slightly. He remembered Daniel's determination to get the truth out, the risk he'd taken to broadcast the footage. "Daniel's a brave man," he said quietly. "Standing up like this could cost him everything." They didn't know how right those words were. Across town, Lieutenant Rourke watched the broadcast with cold fury in his office. His face grew darker with each passing second as his carefully constructed narrative crumbled. When the footage finished playing, he stood slowly, deliberately, like a predator preparing to strike. "Get the cars," he ordered into his phone. "No marks, no uniforms, and bring the gasoline." At the news studio, Daniel was still broadcasting, taking calls from viewers outraged by the police corruption exposed in the footage. The studio buzzed with energy as ratings soared, and social media engagement broke records. "The response has been overwhelming," Daniel told his audience, his tired face alive with purpose. "We're seeing protests starting spontaneously in cities across." The studio doors burst open. Daniel turned, his eyes widening as masked men poured in. The camera caught Rourke's face clearly as he entered last, not bothering to hide his identity. "Keep rolling," Daniel shouted to his cameraman, standing his ground as Rourke's men grabbed staff members and shoved them toward exits. "The public needs to see—" The first punch knocked him backward over his desk. The camera tilted wildly as the cameraman was dragged away. Viewers watched in horror as Rourke's men methodically doused the studio with gasoline. "You should have stayed in your lane," Rourke said, standing over Daniel. He pulled out a lighter, its flame reflecting in his cold eyes. "Some stories aren't meant to be told." The live feed cut out as the first flames erupted. Fire alarms blared through the building. Dark smoke billowed from the windows as Rourke's men prevented anyone from reaching the studio where Daniel was trapped. In Leah's basement, Marcus and Leah watched in helpless horror as news helicopters showed the studio engulfed in flames. Emergency services were mysteriously delayed. By the time firefighters arrived, the top floor was an inferno. "Oh, God," Leah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "They killed him. They really killed him." Marcus stood rigid, his jaw clenched so tight it hurt. The flames on screen reflected in his eyes, mixing with memories of combat and death. Daniel had died trying to help him, trying to expose the truth. Another innocent life destroyed by Rourke's corruption. The news reported the fire had claimed Daniel's life and destroyed all equipment, including, presumably, the damning footage. But the truth had already spread too far to be contained. Across the country, people who'd watched Daniel's final broadcast were sharing recordings, refusing to let his sacrifice be forgotten. 3 days after Daniel's death, Marcus sat in Leah's kitchen, staring at a cold cup of coffee. The morning news played softly in the background, cycling through footage of the studio fire and somber tributes to Daniel Cross. Dark circles under Marcus's eyes revealed sleepless nights filled with guilt. Leah paced the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, I understand. No, we need federal intervention now." She hung up with a frustrated sigh. "My contact at the Justice Department says they're building a case, but it could take weeks." "Daniel didn't have weeks," Marcus said quietly. His hands tightened around the coffee mug. "He trusted me, and now he's dead. This isn't your fault." Leah stopped pacing and sat across from him. "Daniel knew the risks. He chose to stand up against corruption. Just like you did." Marcus pushed the coffee away. "Maybe if I'd just let them kill me that day." "Don't," Leah's voice cracked. "Don't you dare say that. Daniel exposed the truth, and people saw it. His sacrifice wasn't for nothing. And what about the next person Rourke kills? Or the one after that?" Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I can't hide while others die for me." "Marcus, please." Leah grabbed his arm. "I have contacts working to build a federal case. We just need time. Stay here where it's safe." But Marcus was already checking his phone, reading an encrypted message. Someone from Daniel's team reached out. Says they have backup copies of everything, including evidence we haven't seen yet. "It could be a trap," Leah warned. "I know." Marcus moved toward the basement where he kept his gear. "But if there's even a chance they have more evidence..." Leah followed him down the stairs. "Then let me set up a secure meeting. We can verify their identity first. Make sure..." "There's no time." Marcus pulled on a dark jacket, checking the pistol concealed inside. "They want to meet in an hour. Old Warehouse District, Building 47. "That's too exposed." Leah's legal mind raced through scenarios. "At least let me come with you. I can..." "No." Marcus turned to face her, his expression softening. "I need you safe. If something goes wrong, you're the only one who can keep fighting legally." Leah hugged him fiercely. "Just promise me you'll be careful. We already lost Daniel. I can't lose you too." Marcus hugged back, then pulled away. "I'll check in every 30 minutes. If you don't hear from me, I'll raise hell," Leah finished. "The whole world will know what happened." An hour later, Marcus approached Building 47 with practiced caution. The warehouse district was a maze of abandoned buildings and blind corners, perfect for an ambush. His SEAL training screamed danger at every shadow. He circled the building twice, noting exit routes and cover positions. No cars visible, but plenty of places to hide them. No movement in the windows, but the glass was too dirty to see clearly. Everything felt wrong. His phone vibrated. Another message from the contact. Inside, second floor. Hurry! Marcus knew it was a trap. But if there was even a chance of more evidence, of something that could bring Rourke down, he had to try. He slipped through a side door, moving silently despite his size. The first floor was empty except for old machinery and dust. The stairs creaked under his feet as he ascended, every sense hyper-alert. The second floor was darker, windows blocked by old shelving. Marcus's hand moved to his concealed weapon. "Hello?" he called out. "I'm here about Daniel." The lights blazed on suddenly, blinding him. "Police! Don't move!" Marcus dropped and rolled as tasers fired from multiple directions. His training took over. He kicked a shelf into one group of officers, drove his elbow into another's solar plexus. Rifles aimed but couldn't fire in the chaos as Marcus moved like a shadow through their ranks. 3 officers down in seconds. A 4th rushed him with a baton, but Marcus caught his arm and used the momentum to throw him into 2 more. His body moved with lethal precision, each strike calculated to disable without killing. But there were too many. As Marcus disabled a 7th officer, Carter emerged from behind a pillar. The baton caught Marcus in the back of the head with a sickening crack. Marcus stumbled, vision blurring. He tried to turn, to fight back, but his legs wouldn't respond. The concrete floor rushed up to meet him. "Secure him!" Rourke's voice cut through the chaos. "Get those cuffs on now!" Cold metal snapped around Marcus's wrists as officers piled on, pressing him into the floor. Blood trickled down his neck from the baton strike. Through dimming vision, he saw news cameras appearing in the doorway, their lights harsh and accusing. "A dangerous fugitive has been apprehended," Rourke announced for the cameras, his voice dripping with false authority. "The streets are safe again thanks to the brave actions of our officers." The cameras ate it up, recording Marcus's defeat for the evening news. No one seemed to notice or care about the 7 officers still groaning on the floor, proof of just how hard they'd had to fight to bring down one man. From the shadows beyond the camera lights, Rourke watched with a satisfied smirk as officers dragged Marcus to his feet. Their eyes met for a moment. Predator and prey. Corruption versus justice. Marcus might be captured, but his defiant glare promised this wasn't over. The cameras rolled as Marcus was led away in chains, headlines already writing themselves across the nation. Cop killer caught. But they missed the real story. How many armed officers it had taken to subdue one man. How the lieutenant stayed safely in the shadows. How justice itself was being dragged away in handcuffs. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as guards shoved Marcus into the narrow concrete cell. His head still throbbed from Carter's baton strike, dried blood caking the back of his neck. The door slammed with a metallic clang that echoed through the solitary confinement block. "Welcome to your new home, killer," one guard sneered through the small window. "Hope you like the accommodations." Marcus slowly lowered himself onto the thin mattress, his muscles screaming in protest. The cell was barely 6 feet wide, just enough room for the bed, toilet, and small metal sink. No window, no clock, nothing to mark the passage of time except the harsh artificial light that never turned off. Hours passed in a haze of pain and thirst. The guards had forgotten to bring water, ignoring his requests. It was a common tactic. Dehydration made prisoners easier to break. Marcus had learned about these techniques during his SEAL training, but experiencing them firsthand was different. When footsteps finally approached, it wasn't water they brought. Two guards appeared, nightsticks tapping against the bars. "Look who's not so tough now," the taller one taunted. "Heard you took down 7 of our boys before Carter got you. Bet you're real proud of that." Marcus stayed silent, conserving energy. His SEAL instructors had drilled it into them. Don't engage with interrogators. Don't show weakness. Don't give them the satisfaction. "Hey, we're talking to you, terrorist!" The guard slammed his stick against the bars, the sound reverberating through Marcus's aching head. "Think you're better than us? Think your fancy military training makes you special?" Still no response. Marcus focused on his breathing, slow and steady, just like during Hell Week when they'd been forced to endure hours of surf torture in the freezing Pacific. "Whatever." The guard spat on the floor. "Enjoy dying of thirst, hero." Their laughter faded down the corridor. Marcus eyed the small sink, but the water had been shut off. Another mind game. His tongue felt like sandpaper, his lips cracking. But he'd gone longer without water during survival training. The body could endure far more than most people realized. The next morning, or what he assumed was morning, with no natural light to guide him, the cell door opened. A different guard stood there with Leah. "You have 15 minutes," the guard barked. Leah rushed to Marcus, her eyes widening at his condition. "Oh, God, Marcus, what have they done to you?" "I'm fine," he said, his voice rough from thirst. "Just their usual welcome party. This is illegal treatment." Leah's lawyer mode kicked in, but her voice shook with fury. "I'm filing complaints with—" "Save your energy," Marcus interrupted. "They don't care about complaints. This is personal now." Leah sat beside him on the thin mattress, taking in the bruises on his face, the dried blood they hadn't let him wash off. "The federal investigation is moving forward. They're looking into Rourke's connections, following the money trail. We just need you to hold on." Marcus managed a small smile. "I've handled worse." "Have you?" Leah challenged. "This isn't a war zone, Marcus. This is supposed to be justice. Maybe there's not much difference anymore." Marcus shifted, wincing at the pain in his ribs. "At least in war, you know who the enemy is." Leah grabbed his hand, squeezing hard. "We're not giving up. People are still protesting. Daniel's death made national news. Even some officers are starting to question Rourke's story." Marcus closed his eyes, remembering another lesson from his training days. Their instructor, face weathered by decades of combat, standing before the exhausted SEAL candidates. "Pain is temporary. Honor is forever. Remember that when everything else fails you." "Marcus," Leah's voice pulled him back. "Stay with me. Stay strong." "Always do." He squeezed her hand back. "How's the neighborhood?" "Still under siege. Rourke has patrols everywhere, harassing anyone who speaks up. But people aren't backing down. They're organizing, documenting everything." "Time's up." The guard banged on the door. Leah stood reluctantly. "I'll be back tomorrow, and I'm bringing water, whether they like it or not." "Be careful," Marcus warned. "Rourke's desperate now. That makes him dangerous." "So am I." Leah's eyes flashed. They picked the wrong family to mess with. After she left, the silence pressed in again. Marcus forced himself to stand, ignoring the dizziness from dehydration. He began a series of careful stretches, another lesson from his training. Keep the body moving. Keep the mind sharp. Never let them see you break. Hours crawled by. The lights hummed. Guards passed, some ignoring him, others stopping to taunt. Marcus retreated into memories of his training, using them as armor against the psychological warfare. He remembered the endless runs through sand, carrying inflatable boats on their heads, the hypothermia, the sleep deprivation, the instructors trying every trick to make them quit. But most of all, he remembered the brotherhood. Men from all backgrounds, united by a code of honor stronger than any prejudice. Night brought no darkness, just fewer footsteps in the corridor. Marcus lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, feeling every bruise and ache. In the artificial quiet, he could almost hear his old instructor's voice. "They can break your body, but they can't break your spirit unless you let them." Marcus touched the dried blood on his neck, thought of Daniel's courage, of Leah's determination, of all the people still fighting outside these walls. His voice was barely a whisper in the empty cell. "They think this is the end. It's not." Officer Miguel Torres sat alone in the evidence room, staring at the small backup drive in his trembling hands. The late-night shift was quiet, with only skeleton crews manning the precinct. Perfect timing for what he had to do. His police radio crackled with routine updates. A domestic disturbance across town, a drunk driver on Main Street. Normal police work, the kind he'd dreamed of doing when he joined the force. Not this corrupt nightmare he'd stumbled into. The footage on the drive haunted him. He'd discovered it purely by accident while cataloging evidence from Daniel Cross's burned studio. Most of the journalist's equipment had been destroyed, but this drive, tucked away in a fireproof safe, survived. Torres had watched it in secret, sick to his stomach as the truth unfolded in high definition. The body cam footage showed everything. Officer Donnelly's racist taunts, the deliberate escalation, the whispered threat to Marcus. It was textbook police brutality, exactly what Torres had sworn to fight against when he took his oath. "What are you still doing here, rookie?" Torres nearly jumped out of his skin. Officer Martinez stood in the doorway, eyebrows raised. "Just finishing some paperwork," Torres managed, sliding the drive into his pocket. "You know how Lieutenant Rourke is about reports." Martinez chuckled. "Yeah, real stickler lately. Ever since this Hale business started." He lingered in the doorway. "You okay, kid? You look pale." "Fine," Torres said quickly. "Just tired. Long shift. Get some rest, then. Tomorrow's gonna be busy. Rourke wants increased patrols around the courthouse. Keep those protesters in line." Torres nodded. Gathering his things with hands, he forced to stay steady. Every moment the drive stayed in his pocket felt like carrying a live grenade. The night air hit him as he left the precinct, cool and damp. His personal car waited in the back lot, away from the squad cars. As he drove through the empty streets, Torres's mind raced with doubts and fears. He knew what happened to cops who crossed the thin blue line. They lost more than their badges. They lost their careers, their reputations, sometimes their lives. But the weight of silence had become unbearable. Leah Hale's law office was dark when he pulled into the parking lot, except for one window on the third floor. He'd done his research. She often worked late, especially since Marcus's arrest. Still, approaching a civil rights attorney felt like high treason to everything he'd been taught at the academy. The security guard at the front desk barely glanced up from his crossword puzzle. "Office is closed." Torres showed his badge. "Police business. Ms. Hale is expecting me." It was a lie, but the badge worked its usual magic. The guard buzzed him through, and Torres took the stairs, too anxious for the elevator. Leah's office door was open, warm light spilling into the hallway. She looked up from her desk, surrounded by case files and empty coffee cups. Her eyes narrowed at his uniform. "Can I help you, officer?" Torres closed the door carefully behind him. "Ms. Hale, I have something you need to see." If this is more police intimidation— No, he cut her off, pulling out the drive with shaking fingers. This is the truth. About your brother. About everything. Leah stood slowly, her expression guarded. What are you talking about? Daniel Cross's footage. The real footage. Not what they showed on TV. It survived the fire. Torres set the drive on her desk. I found it in evidence. It shows what really happened that day. Leah stared at the drive like it might explode. Why are you bringing this to me? Because I can't sleep anymore. Torres's voice cracked. Because every day I watch good people get hurt while Rourke and his cronies laugh about it. Because this isn't what I signed up for. Leah picked up the drive, studying it. You realize what this means? If anyone finds out you brought this to me— I know. Torres swallowed hard. But someone has to stand up. Daniel Cross did, and they killed him for it. They'll do the same to you if they catch you. Then make it count. Torres met her eyes. Make sure everyone sees what really happened. Make sure Daniel didn't die for nothing. Leah slipped the drive into her briefcase. I'll protect you. We can arrange witness protection, federal immunity. No. Torres shook his head. I need to stay where I am. Keep my eyes open. There's more corruption than just this case. Someone needs to document it all. That's incredibly dangerous. So is letting them get away with it. Torres straightened his uniform. Just be careful how you use that footage. They'll know someone on the inside helped you. Leah nodded slowly. Thank you. For doing the right thing. I should have done it sooner. Torres turned to leave, then paused. Tell your brother. Tell him not everyone with a badge is his enemy. He slipped out of the office, heart pounding. Through the window, he watched Leah quickly pack her briefcase and throw on her coat. She moved with purpose now, a woman with ammunition finally in her hands. As she hurried to her car, Torres leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. He'd just thrown away everything he'd worked for, everything he'd dreamed of since childhood. His career, his safety, maybe his life, all hanging on the hope that truth still meant something in this world. But watching Leah drive away with the evidence that could save her brother, Torres felt something he hadn't experienced since this nightmare began. Peace. Whatever happened next, he'd chosen his side. He'd chosen right over easy, truth over loyalty, justice over power. His hands had finally stopped shaking. Leah's hands trembled as she connected her laptop to a maze of cables in the basement of the community center. Around her, a dozen activists huddled over their own devices, their faces lit by screen glows in the dim light. The air hummed with nervous energy and the whir of cooling fans. "Servers ready?" she asked Maria, a local tech whiz who'd volunteered her expertise. Maria nodded, fingers flying across her keyboard. 5 different streaming platforms, all running through secure VPNs. If they try to shut one down, the others keep going. Plus, I've got 20 community groups ready to share instantly. They'll try to trace it, Leah warned, clutching the precious drive. Let them try. Maria grinned. By the time they figure out where it's coming from, the whole world will have seen it. Reverend Jackson, who'd offered his church's basement as their broadcast hub, placed a steadying hand on Leah's shoulder. The people are ready, child. Truth has a way of spreading like wildfire. Leah took a deep breath, remembering Daniel's death, Torres's risk, and Marcus sitting alone in his cell. She plugged in the drive. Okay, let's do this right. We need to add context. Explain what people are seeing. I've got protest footage queued up, said Jamal, a young filmmaker. Shows how they've been terrorizing the neighborhood since this started. Split screen with the body cam video? Perfect. Leah's legal training kicked in. And I want to highlight key moments. Freeze frames, where you can clearly see Donnelly draw first, show the timestamp that proves they waited to ambush Marcus. The team worked quickly, professional despite their makeshift studio. They added captions, enhanced audio, and created a clear timeline of events. The footage was damning, not just of the officers involved, but of the entire cover-up that followed. 5 minutes to broadcast, Maria announced. Community networks are standing by. Black Lives Matter chapters across 3 states are ready to share. Local Facebook groups, Twitter networks, everything. Leah's phone buzzed. A text from Torres. Rourke just got word something's happening. Be careful. She showed the message to Maria, who nodded grimly. They can't stop all the streams. Not fast enough. 3 minutes, called Jamal. Leah thought of Marcus, how he'd tried to live quietly, avoid conflict, how they'd forced him into this fight. Her hands steadied as she prepared to narrate the opening statement they'd written. 1 minute. The basement fell silent except for the hum of equipment. Reverend Jackson squeezed her shoulder again. Speak truth to power, sister. Streaming live in 3, 2, 1. Leah's voice was clear and strong as she faced the camera. My name is Leah Hale. I'm about to show you what the police department tried to bury. What they killed a journalist to keep hidden. This is the truth about what happened to my brother, Marcus Hale. The footage began to play. The quality was crystal clear. Multiple angles showing the routine stop that was anything but routine. Donnelly's body cam caught every word of their racist taunts. The street camera showed them blocking Marcus's car against the construction barriers, a deliberate trap. Listen closely, Leah narrated as they enhanced the audio. Donnelly's whispered threat rang out. You won't be going home tonight. The footage played on, showing the officers drawing weapons first, proving Marcus fired only in self-defense. The timestamp proved they'd waited at that spot for over an hour before pulling him over. Alerts started popping up on their screens as the video spread. Shares, retweets, live reactions exploding across social media. Maria's network of activists pushed it everywhere, making it impossible to contain. Unbelievable, Jamal whispered, checking his phone. It's trending nationwide already. Outside, they heard car horns honking, people gathering. The church's parking lot filled with community members drawn by the broadcast, their phones held high, spreading the truth further. Police scanners going crazy, Maria reported. They're scrambling units, but they don't know where we're broadcasting from. Leah kept narrating, her voice steady as she detailed the department's cover-up, Daniel's murder, the brutality against protesters. With each revelation, the crowd outside grew louder. Reverend Jackson's phone rang. Churches across the city are opening their doors, he reported. People are gathering, organizing. The broadcast continued for over an hour, showing every angle, every detail. By the time they finished, the streets were filled with chanting protesters. Police sirens wailed in the distance, but they were too late. The truth was out, spreading faster than they could contain it. Keep it running on loops, Leah instructed as she gathered her things. I need to get to the jail. Marcus needs to know. Upstairs, the scene took her breath away. Thousands of people filled the streets, more arriving every minute. Signs appeared as if by magic. Justice for Marcus Hale, and Stop Police Terror, and The Truth is Out. Her phone buzzed again. Torres. Whole department in chaos. Rourke's gone dark. FBI asking questions. The crowd parted for her car as she drove toward the jail, their chants growing louder with every block. Near the detention center, The crowd swelled to fill the entire street. They faced the high concrete walls, voices united in a thunderous call. "Free Marcus Hale! Free Marcus Hale!" Inside his cell, Marcus pressed his hand against the cold wall, feeling the vibration of thousands of voices. The sound penetrated even these thick walls, carrying the message of truth finally breaking free. The chant grew stronger, an unstoppable wave of justice that shook the very foundation of his prison. "Free Marcus Hale! Free Marcus Hale!" Lieutenant Rourke paced the mahogany-paneled conference room, his face red with rage. City council members and police brass sat around the long table, their faces drawn with worry as they watched the viral footage on a large screen. "This is clearly edited," Rourke sputtered, jabbing his finger at the image. "We can prove it's been tampered with." City Manager Phillips shook his head. "Frank, I've had 3 different experts look at it. The footage is authentic. Timestamps, metadata, everything checks out. We've got millions of people watching this right now." "Then we spin it." Rourke slammed his fist on the table. "These officers felt threatened. Hale has military training. He's basically a human weapon." "That won't work anymore," the city attorney interrupted, shuffling through papers. "We've got protesters at every precinct. Media's camped outside headquarters. The FBI just called. They're sending a civil rights team." Rourke's temple throbbed. Outside the window, he could hear the crowd's chants growing louder. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from officers asking what to do, how to respond to reporters' questions. "Where's Carter?" he demanded. "Get him in here now!" Minutes later, Officer Carter slunk into the room. His uniform was wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. He couldn't meet anyone's gaze. "Tell them what really happened," Rourke ordered. "Tell them Hale was resisting. That Donnelly—" "I can't." Carter's voice cracked. "I can't lie anymore, Lieutenant." The room fell silent. Rourke's face went from red to purple. "What did you say?" "You told us to take him out," Carter continued, his hands shaking. "Said he was getting too nosy about the missing evidence in the Rodriguez case. Said he needed to disappear before he connected it to the department. But we didn't know he was a SEAL. Didn't know he could fight back." "Officer Carter," the city attorney warned, "perhaps we should discuss this in private." "No!" Carter was unraveling now, words spilling out. "Donnelly was supposed to plant the gun, make it look like a drug deal gone bad. But Hale knew. He knew the second we pulled him over. The way he looked at us, he knew we were there to kill him." Rourke moved with shocking speed for his size, grabbing Carter's collar. "Shut your mouth! Get your hands off him!" Phillips stood up. "Frank, this is over. The feds are coming. We need to contain the damage." A commotion in the hallway cut him off. Men and women in dark suits streamed into the room, badges out. "FBI, everyone stay where you are." Rourke released Carter, stepping back. An agent in a sharp blazer approached him. "Lieutenant Frank Rourke, I'm Special Agent Martinez. We're here to seize all department files related to the Marcus Hale incident, as well as any internal affairs investigations from the past 5 years." "You have no authority," Rourke began. "We have federal warrants." Martinez's tone was ice. "And we've received multiple whistleblower complaints about systematic civil rights violations. Please step aside." More agents poured in, heading for the records room, the evidence lockers, the computer servers. Rourke watched helplessly as they began boxing up files. Carter sat heavily in a chair, head in his hands. "I want to make a statement," he said quietly. "About everything. The Rodriguez case, the missing evidence, what really happened with Hale." "Officer Carter," Martinez nodded to a colleague, "we'll take your statement in a formal interview. Please come with us." Rourke's world crumbled as he watched Carter leave with the feds. His phone buzzed again. More officers wanting to talk. More evidence surfacing. The dam was breaking. In the detention center across town, Marcus sat on his narrow bunk, listening to the protests outside. The walls seemed to vibrate with the energy of the crowd. He'd lost track of time in here, marking days only by meal deliveries and guard shifts. The door at the end of the block clanged open. Footsteps approached. More than usual. Marcus stood, facing the cell door as it swung open. 3 guards entered, led by the warden himself. One held a stack of papers. "Mr. Hale," the warden said formally, "in light of new evidence, the district attorney has dropped all charges. These are your release papers." Marcus stayed perfectly still as they removed his shackles. The metal cuffs fell away from his wrists, leaving pale marks on his skin. He rubbed them automatically, feeling the weight lift. "Your sister is waiting in processing," the warden continued. "Your personal effects have been gathered." Marcus followed them down the long corridor, past other cells where inmates called out support. The processing room was bright with fluorescent lights. Leah waited there, tears in her eyes, holding his clothes. He changed quickly in a side room, putting on his own jeans and t-shirt, slipping his feet into his boots. Each familiar item felt like reclaiming a piece of himself. The final door opened. Marcus stepped out into the afternoon sun, blinking at the brightness. The roar hit him like a physical wave, thousands of voices cheering as he emerged. The crowd filled every inch of space around the detention center, signs waving, phones recording. Leah squeezed his hand. "Welcome back to the world, big brother." Marcus took a deep breath of free air, feeling it fill his lungs. The sky stretched endless and blue above him. For the first time in days, no walls confined him, no bars blocked his view. He was free, and the truth had finally broken through. The courthouse steps were crowded with protesters and news crews as Marcus climbed them, head held high despite the orange jumpsuit and chains. Leah walked beside him, carrying her briefcase, her face set with determination. The morning sun caught the brass door handles as guards pushed them open. Inside the packed courtroom, every seat was filled. Community members, activists, and reporters pressed shoulder to shoulder in the gallery. Some wore "Justice for Marcus" t-shirts. Others held small signs until the bailiff made them put them away. The air felt electric with tension and hope. Marcus's chains clinked as he walked to the defense table. He caught glimpses of familiar faces. Neighbors who'd been harassed during the manhunt. Teenagers who'd been beaten at protests. Elderly church members who'd brought him food in hiding. They nodded encouragement. Judge Patricia Chen studied her papers as Marcus was seated. Her reputation for being tough but fair had given Leah hope. The prosecution table sat conspicuously empty. The district attorney had withdrawn, leaving only internal affairs investigators and FBI agents in the front row. "All rise," called the bailiff. The room rustled to attention. Judge Chen looked over her reading glasses at Marcus. "Mr. Hale, you stand accused of attempted murder of a police officer, resisting arrest, and multiple related charges. However, new evidence has been presented that dramatically changes the nature of this case." She turned to Leah. "Counselor, you may proceed." Leah stood, smooth and professional, despite having barely slept. "Your Honor, I present security camera footage from the construction site where this incident occurred, as well as officer body camera video that was deliberately suppressed." She nodded to the court technician. The screens lit up. The footage was crystal clear. Marcus's car being pulled over, the officer's aggressive approach, the whispered threat picked up by their mics, the moment they drew weapons first. The courtroom watched in tense silence as the scene played out. This evidence clearly shows my client acting in self-defense against an orchestrated attempt on his life, Leah continued. Furthermore, we have testimony from Officer Paul Carter regarding the broader conspiracy behind this incident. Carter sat in the witness box, pale and sweating in his uniform. His eyes darted between Marcus and the door as he spoke into the microphone. "Lieutenant Rourke ordered us to take Marcus Hale out," he said, voice shaking. "Said he was asking questions about missing evidence in another case. Evidence that would have exposed department corruption. We were supposed to make it look like a drug shooting." He swallowed hard. "But we didn't know who we were dealing with. Didn't know he could fight back." A murmur ran through the gallery. Judge Chen's face darkened as Carter continued describing years of covered-up misconduct, planted evidence, and brutality against civilians, all under Rourke's command. "And where is Lieutenant Rourke now?" the judge asked sharply. As if on cue, the courtroom doors burst open. Rourke strode in, still wearing his uniform despite being suspended. "This is all lies, Your Honor. Carter's been coerced. The footage is fake." "Lieutenant Rourke," Judge Chen's voice cut like steel. "You were not called to testify, and based on the evidence presented, you are no longer in any position to—" "This man is a threat." Rourke jabbed a finger at Marcus. "He's trained to kill. He's trying to destroy everything we've built. Federal agents, take him into custody," Judge Chen ordered. "Lieutenant Rourke, you are in contempt of this court." Two FBI agents moved quickly to grab Rourke's arms. He fought them, face purple with rage, as they wrestled him into handcuffs. "You can't do this. I was protecting this city. I was—" "Remove him," the judge commanded. The gallery watched in stunned silence as the former lieutenant was dragged out, still shouting. Judge Chen took a deep breath, then fixed Marcus with a steady gaze. "Mr. Hale, please rise." Marcus stood tall, chains rattling. The room seemed to hold its breath. "Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, I find that you acted in clear self-defense against a premeditated attempt on your life by corrupt officers. All charges against you are hereby dismissed." She paused, removing her glasses. "Furthermore, I am recommending a full federal investigation into the police department's conduct and civil rights charges against all involved officers." The gavel cracked like thunder. "Case dismissed!" The gallery exploded in cheers and applause. Marcus felt the chains fall away as Leah threw her arms around him. He hugged her tight, tears streaming down both their faces. Years of military training hadn't prepared him for this moment. The pure relief of vindication, of truth finally breaking through. People pressed forward to congratulate them. Hands reached out to pat Marcus's back, shake his hand, offer support. Reporters called questions. Camera flashes burst like lightning. But Marcus just held his sister, the woman who'd never stopped fighting for him. "Thank you," he whispered. Leah pulled back, wiping her eyes. "You never gave up. That's what matters." Through the windows, they could hear the crowd outside roaring as news of the dismissal spread. The morning sun streamed in, warming Marcus's face. For the first time since that terrible traffic stop, he felt the weight lift completely from his shoulders. He was free, not just from charges, but from hiding who he was and what he'd survived. The bailiff began clearing the courtroom, but the energy remained electric. Justice had won. The truth had come to light. And Marcus Hale, the quiet warehouse worker who'd been forced to fight back, stood vindicated before the world. The autumn sun painted City Hall's stone steps golden as Marcus adjusted his tie. The navy blue suit felt strange after weeks in prison orange, but Leah had insisted. "Look the part of the leader you've become," she'd said. Behind him, the classical columns of the building stretched skyward. Before him, the plaza overflowed with thousands. They carried handmade signs: "Justice for Marcus," "End police corruption," "Never again." Some waved American flags. Others held photos of loved ones lost to police violence. The energy was different from the angry protests during his manhunt. This was a celebration of truth exposed, of change demanded and won. Leah stood to his right in a crisp blazer, her legal pad tucked under one arm. She'd spent the morning helping him polish his speech, though they both knew he'd speak from the heart when the moment came. On his left, Officer Miguel Torres shifted nervously in his dress uniform. The young cop had risked everything to leak the truth, and now he represented hope for reform from within the system. "You ready?" Leah squeezed Marcus's arm. He nodded, stepping to the microphone. The crowd fell silent. Thousands of faces turned upward. Television cameras swung to capture him. Marcus gripped the podium, took a deep breath, and began. "3 months ago, I was driving home from work. Just another day, another shift done. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't trying to be a hero." His voice carried clear and strong across the plaza. "But 2 corrupt officers decided I wouldn't make it home that night. They thought they could kill me and hide the truth, like they'd done to others before." A murmur ran through the crowd. Marcus continued, his words gathering power. "They didn't know about my military training. They didn't know I could fight back. But that's not why I'm standing here today. I'm here because ordinary people, my sister Leah, journalist Daniel Cross, who gave his life for the truth, Officer Torres, who chose conscience over corruption, they stood up and said, 'Enough.'" He gestured to the crowd, encompassing them all. "You stood up, you marched, you demanded justice, and for once the system had to listen." Signs waved like a forest in the wind. Some people wiped tears. Others nodded fiercely. "But this isn't just about me. This is about every person who's been bullied by those sworn to protect them. Every family that's lost someone to violence hidden behind a badge. Every community living in fear instead of trust." Marcus's voice grew passionate, reaching to the very back of the plaza. "I spent years trying to live quietly, keeping my head down, telling myself it wasn't my fight. But silence doesn't bring change. Silence lets corruption grow. Silence kills." He paused, letting the words sink in. A chant started somewhere in the crowd. "No more silence! No more silence! The department that tried to murder me has been exposed. Lieutenant Rourke and his corrupt officers are facing federal charges. But that's just the beginning. We need real reform, civilian oversight, accountability, transparency. We need police who serve the community, not themselves." Torres straightened beside him, embodying that possibility. In the weeks since the trial, he'd become a voice for change within the force, speaking out against the old guard's resistance. "I'm not hiding anymore," Marcus declared. "I'm not running. I fought for this country overseas, and now I'll fight for justice right here at home. But I need every one of you to fight too. To speak up when you see wrong. To demand better from those in power. To stand together, because united, we can't be ignored." The crowd roared approval. Marcus gripped the podium tighter, his voice rising with emotion. "They tried to make me disappear. Instead, they woke up a warrior. They tried to bury the truth. Instead, they planted seeds of change. They tried to silence us all. But look around. Listen to our voices. We will not be silent anymore." The plaza erupted. People hugged strangers, raised their fists, chanted his name. Marcus felt the energy wash over him like a wave. This was what he'd trained for, fought for, survived for, not just personal victory, but the chance to make real change. Leah stepped forward, tears gleaming in her eyes. She'd fought so hard for this moment, using law and truth as her weapons. Torres stood at attention, his young face full of purpose. They flanked Marcus like symbols of justice and reform united. "The work starts now," Marcus called out. "Today, we celebrate. Tomorrow, we organize. We educate. We transform this moment into lasting change. Because every person deserves to drive home without fear. Every community deserves real protection. Every voice deserves to be heard." He raised his fist high, and thousands of fists rose with him. The chants grew deafening. "Justice! Freedom! Change!" The autumn breeze carried their voices across the city. News helicopters circled overhead, capturing the historic moment. Marcus stood tall, no longer the quiet warehouse worker, no longer the hunted man. He was a leader now, a symbol of resistance and hope, proof that truth could still triumph over power. The afternoon sun caught his raised fist, casting its shadow across the city hall steps, where so many corrupt officials had once walked. But today belonged to justice. Today belonged to the people. Today marked a new chapter, not just for Marcus Hale, but for every person who'd ever faced systemic oppression and dared to fight back. His voice rose one final time, strong and clear. "Together, we rise. Together, we change. Together, we are unstoppable." The crowd's answering roar echoed off the surrounding buildings, a thunder of determination and hope rolling across the city like a wave of change that could never be turned back. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have hand-picked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.